When Derek Johnson was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, his family thought that he would never be able to speak. And then they met Professor Anna Stubblefield, and she believed that with the right technique, he could say what was on his mind. But what began as an opportunity turned into accusations of sexual assault. I'm Kathleen Goldhar, and this week on Crime Story, we dive into the complicated questions surrounding the doc, Tell Them You Love Me. Find Crime Story wherever you get your podcasts.
You know the feeling of finding a really good podcast? Or the feeling of someone always being there, like your favorite radio show? Stream CBC Podcasts, CBC Music, and CBC Radio anytime, anywhere.
This is CBC News. Good afternoon. I'm Rosanna Hempel. At 12 o'clock, it's minus 20 in Winnipeg. A mix of sun and cloud today, high of minus 18, wind chill near minus 33. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau spoke on the phone this morning with U.S. President Donald Trump, and the two are planning another call in a couple of hours. The talks happen as U.S. tariffs on Canada are set to go into effect at midnight. Richard Madden has more from Washington.
Judging by the president's social media, it doesn't appear he was sold by Canada's charm offensive. President Trump posted fresh new attacks criticizing Canada's border security and business practices that block U.S. companies from expanding north. And moments before the call, Trump's top economic advisor, Kevin Hassett, accused Canada of not understanding the text of the executive order and ripped into the Trudeau government.
The Canadians appear to have misunderstood the plain language of the executive order.
Now, the White House is aggressively defending Trump's tariff plan, spinning who's to blame should prices go up in this looming trade war. A top Canadian official admitted to me they're not optimistic things will change much in the short term, but at least the two leaders are talking. Another call is set for around 3 p.m. Eastern time today, so there is a small window left to reach a deal, but the challenge is it's unclear what it will take to satisfy Trump's concerns. Richard Madden, CBC News, Washington.
Premier Wab Kinew is getting advice today from all sectors of the province that will be hit by the Trump tariffs. About 24 members of Manitoba's U.S. Trade Council are meeting at the legislature. They include labor and business leaders and people representing agriculture, mineral development and transportation. Kinew also invited Indigenous leaders. He wants them to help define Manitoba's response to support and protect jobs and the local economy.
How we can increase productivity in our economy and how we can diversify our export markets towards partners around the world who are going to treat us fairly and who are going to be predictable allies that we can build long-term business relationships with.
Kinew says he also wants to discuss issues beyond trade with the council. A grain farmer near Winkler says U.S. tariffs and counter-tariffs are going to have a significant impact on Manitoba producers. Tobin Dick says the higher prices for his products south of the border will reduce demand. He says it may be time for producers to look to other markets in other countries.
In a sense, it is a wake-up call for us to diversify our markets and to really strengthen our relationships with our global customers, right? I mean, we do export all over the world.
Dick says going into this growing season, his margins were fairly tight. He says he and other producers don't have a lot of room to deal with such volatility. A Manitoba distillery says there may be opportunity to grow his business if American booze is banned from the shelves. Premier Wab Kinew announced, as of tomorrow, all American alcohol will be removed from Manitoba liquor marts. Brock Coots co-owns Patent 5, which makes whiskey, vodka, and gin.
There's going to be a lot less for people to choose from, and maybe because of what's going on, people are going to look towards not just the Shop Canadian stickers, but the Shop Local stickers, and they'll find that we have a small but excellent distilling community in Manitoba.
Coots says he's been working on a deal to sell his product in the U.S., but says the tariffs will end that deal. While Canada waits to hear if tariffs on its goods entering the U.S. are indeed going into effect, Mexico has gotten a reprieve. Caroline Bargut reports.
Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum says U.S. President Donald Trump has agreed to hold off on tariffs for a month while the two sides hammer out a deal on security and trade. This after Mexico agreed to rush 10,000 troops from the National Guard to the border in an effort to block the flow of illegal migrants and drugs, specifically fentanyl, from flowing into the United States. For weeks, Trump has said the tariffs would be a response to fentanyl coming into the U.S., killing hundreds of thousands of Americans. Sheinbaum posted on the social media platform X that the United States has also committed to work to stop the trafficking of high-powered weapons to Mexico. So far, the tariffs are still a go on Chinese and Canadian goods. The hope is Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will be able to strike a deal when he speaks with Trump at 3 p.m. Washington time. Caroline Bargut, CBC News, Washington.
Here in Winnipeg, a 34-year-old man died over the weekend after police say he'd been assaulted in the Weston area. Officers were called to the 300 block of Blake Street before 7 Sunday morning. The man later died in hospital. He's been identified as Justin Boulanger, a member of Barons River First Nation. He was living in Winnipeg. Police ask anyone with information to call homicide investigators or Crime Stoppers. And the Giller Prize has cut ties with Scotiabank. It parted ways with its lead sponsor more than a year after members of the literary community began protesting the bank's ties to an Israeli arms manufacturer. The Giller Foundation administers Canada's richest fiction prize and announced the news. It didn't give a reason for the split. That is the CBC News from Winnipeg.
Good afternoon and welcome to Radio Noon. I'm Laurie Hoogstraten on this sunny but chilly day. And coming up on our call-in, you'll be amazed to hear that we want to talk about the possibility of 25% tariffs that may be hitting Manitoba and Canada. We want to know, how will you respond? What won't you be buying anymore? Are you giving up orange juice or something else? Maybe a trip south? Call us with your take on the tariffs, 204-780-0893. And Vikings are often considered the ultimate warrior, but why do we think that? There's an international survey to find out. More on that at 12:15. But first up, Manitoba's economy is focused on imports and exports. We'll hear what the impact of American tariffs might be and how to fight back. Manitoba depends on its imports and exports. Imports like engines, agrochemicals, and trailer components, and exports from wheat to buses. Thousands of jobs are involved, so the effect of 25% tariffs imposed by the Trump administration could be swift and widespread. To give us a picture on how our economy and our citizens may be affected, we've reached Terry Shaw. He is the Regional Vice President for the Prairies with the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters Association. Hello.
Hi, Laurie.
So tell me, how will the announced tariffs impact Manitoba's imports and exports?
It'll just increase the cost of everything that we sell in the United States. So, again, already seeing some uncertainty or some disruptions in the economy because of that, and that's only going to continue should the tariffs actually be imposed.
I think your organization conducted a survey quite recently. What were some of the outstanding results from that?
You bet. Yeah, we conducted a survey nationally of our manufacturing members. And even in advance of the tariffs, they did report some impacts. 30% of the members responding to the survey who were able to had the production capacity, the cash flow capacity, expedited shipments, overshipped to the U.S. to get ahead of tariffs. Over 20% already froze their hiring just in terms of a wait and see to see what happens with the tariffs and then potentially with their sales down the road. 30% of our members nationally have delayed investments pending the tariffs, and 28% are seeking new markets outside of the U.S.
And how many jobs are involved? And how many dollars out of, say, every 10?
Yeah, so in Manitoba alone, I don't have the national stats in front of me.
No, Manitoba.
But in Manitoba alone, 1,400 companies employ 70,000 Manitobans, generating $26 billion a year in sales, paying above average wages. 1 out of every $10 generated in the Manitoba economy is generated by a Manitoba manufacturer. So clearly a large driver of our economy here in Manitoba.
And are some sectors more at risk than others?
In terms of subsectors of manufacturing, no, not to my knowledge. And again, if the tariffs are broad-based in general, then anybody that manufactures and ships something down south will be impacted. In terms of what we've seen so far of the proposed counter tariffs in Canada, a lot of it is food products or consumer goods that are already manufactured. But I am noticing on the list there could be some component parts, lights, plywood, sinks, fridges that might be used as part of the manufacturing process here in Manitoba for people like RV dealers or RV manufacturers, pardon me. So there may be some cost concerns with the potential tariffs or the potential counter tariffs already listed.
And of course, in the manufacturing industries, it's so intermingled the way things get done. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, well, again, the Canadian and U.S. economies are very connected, but the Canadian-U.S. manufacturing economies, very much so. Over half of what the U.S. exports to Canada and over 60% of what we ship down south to the United States are what's called intermediate inputs. And basically what it is we ship them parts that they need to finish their manufacturing process so that they can ship it back and sell it in Canada. A great example I just mentioned is recreational vehicles. We have manufacturers here in Manitoba and Canada that will bring up chassis from the United States, complete a vehicle, and then ship it back down south for sale. That happens every day, across the border from BC through to Newfoundland, and Manitoba is no different.
Well, this would make it difficult when we're going to be talking on our call-in portion of the show about the sort of Team Manitoba, Team Canada approach of like don't buy this and do buy that. But from in the manufacturing, because of the way these things are manufactured, that makes it very difficult for somebody to say, well, I'm not going to buy an RV, for example.
Yeah. So again, if you're going to buy an RV, buy one made in Manitoba, right? It'll still have some component parts from plenty of jurisdictions, including the United States, but the work is getting done here. It's getting designed here. Manitobans are the ones that are completing that product. And so, yeah, please purchase them. So when it comes to, buy Canadian, made in Manitoba, we absolutely support that, not only through Manitoba consumers, but also through our government partners. We've got a large hydro utility. We've got, the healthcare system, the justice and legal systems. They all require inputs such as vehicles, furniture, you name it, kind of component parts for hydro, transformers and things like that. So procurement reform at the government level, municipally, provincially, and with our Crown Corps is something we're promoting as well.
And in terms of kind of cushioning the blow, what do you recommend in terms of reform to make it more profitable for people to stay within Canada doing manufacturing? For sure. In terms of short-term relief, if we're going to impose counter tariffs, any funds raised through those counter tariffs should be redirected at those, sectors and those businesses that are hurting, right? Again, if we can keep dollars in manufacturers' pockets by deferring taxes or, just removing taxes in the short term so that they can keep it, in their business with their staff, keeping their folks employed and doing what they can to keep the lights on and the lines moving, we would certainly encourage that. Longer term, though, we do need to use this collectively, nationally, as an opportunity to look at how competitive Canada is. We need to look at some comprehensive tax reform, regulatory reform. What's the cost of doing business in Manitoba and Canada, and how do we stay competitive with that? So a whole host of things that can get done. And what can the individual Manitoban do besides buying an RV that's made in Manitoba? But what's your message for Manitobans to help combat this?
Yeah, it is. Again, watch labels. Your investment choices matter, right? So when you can, look at Buy Canadian, look for Made in Manitoba, and make your purchasing decisions accordingly.
Thank you very much for being with us on Radio Noon today with this interesting information.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. That's Terry Shaw. He is the Regional Vice President for the Prairies with Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters Association.
Hi, I'm Matea Roach, and I have a new show on CBC. It's called Bookends. Every week, authors from Canada and around the world will join me to discuss their latest books. We'll have best-selling authors and rising stars. Our conversations will be smart and surprising, because when the book ends, the conversation begins.
Bookends with Matea Roach premieres Sunday afternoon at 1:30 in Newfoundland, 3 Pacific, and on demand on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
You are listening to CBC Radio Noon, 89.3 FM, 990 AM. I'm Laurie Hoogstraten. On our call-in today, we'd like you to tell us if you're planning to take a Team Canada and Team Manitoba approach to the impending tariffs, and what will you quit buying or start buying to help out? And how do you think Manitoba should defend itself against the tariffs that might be about to descend? That is the topic of our call-in, 204-780-0893. And in just a minute or two, fearless, ferocious, and far-flung in their open boats with horns sticking out of their hats, swords in their hands, Vikings persist in our imagination. And imagination is the operative word there. We'll hear about a survey that's aimed at finding out why we're such Viking enthusiasts. And taking a look at Riley's forecast for today, temperatures are remaining below seasonal for the foreseeable future, and next chance for snow comes along Wednesday into Thursday thanks to a Colorado low that will skirt along the international border. In Winnipeg today, a mix of sun and clouds and a high of minus 17. It's breezy out there out of the northwest, 20 to 40, down to minus 26 tonight. And tomorrow, mostly sunny, highs of minus 17. Some temperatures around the province at this hour. In Brandon, it's minus 25, Churchill minus 26, Dauphin minus 23, in Gimli it's minus 20, in La Palme minus 21, Thompson minus 24, and in Winnipeg minus 20 with that brisk wind west-northwest at 25. It is 16 minutes after 12 o'clock. Vikings haven't been around since the 12th century, but they still have a pretty high profile. Most people can picture the fierce horn-helmeted warriors voyaging far and wide, pillaging, conquering. But were Vikings really like that? And why do they persist as, in our imaginations, iconic warriors? Researchers want to know, and they want your help. By participating in a survey launched through the University of Oslo in Sweden, you can help solve the mystery. Christian Koymans authored the survey, and he is a postdoctoral researcher at the Museum of Cultural History at the University of Oslo, and that's where we've reached him. Hello. Good afternoon.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for being here. So tell me, what's the purpose of this study?
Yeah, so as part of a wider research project that we're doing at the University of Oslo in Norway, we're investigating how people from around the world think and feel about these sort of historic groups that we call the Vikings, as well as the so-called Viking Age, which represents this extraordinary period in our medieval past. And you know, the Vikings continue to have this very prominent place in our culture, and even so 1,000 years after the fact. And people feel themselves connected to this past in all sorts of different ways, whether it's through their own ancestry or their cultural ties, such as Icelandic and Scandinavian diaspora communities in Manitoba. They could have specific lifestyles or hobbies. It could be through movies or books or video games, or just through a more sort of general curiosity about the period. So it's a history that deeply resonates with people on many different levels, but it's also very romanticized and commercialized and politicized as a result. So it's can be a very mixed bag. Mm-hmm. So we know people are very interested, but we don't always have the clearest sense of how exactly people sort of engage with that past and how that information actually is communicated and used and sometimes misused. So that's the reason why we've recently launched this big online survey, which we've very imaginatively called the Great Viking Survey. And so we invite people from all walks of life, from anywhere on the planet, regardless of their background or education or experience, to tell us how they feel about Vikings as history and as heritage. And that's an invitation that, of course, very much extends to anyone in Manitoba.
How accurate are people's perceptions of Vikings from what you've gathered so far?
Well, I mean, so most people will have at least sort of a rough idea of who the Vikings were as a historical people, so where they came from and where they went. But there is, of course, a lot of sort of stereotypes out there. You know, the beards and the bloodshed and the horned helmets, and that's part of the story for sure, but it's not the entire story. And people have all sorts of different ideas about Vikings, and it's really this kind of survey that we've launched that we're trying to figure out how that expresses itself in all sorts of different ways.
And what are some of the biggest misconceptions about Vikings in the public imagination?
Oh, I would say it is exactly that. It is the fact that they were only burly masculine men going on raiding expeditions and just for the violence and with their horned helmets and their big swords. I think the real Viking Age was a much more nuanced sort of period than that, with people going abroad for all sorts of different reasons and with all sorts of different objectives. And I think the Vikings themselves were such a broad range of different peoples as well. I mean, most of them would have been Scandinavians, but people from all different types of backgrounds, people who are not Scandinavian, people, there were entire family groups that went on these expeditions. We know that women would have accompanied these kinds of groups. So it's a much more nuanced and complicated story than we generally than the one we generally hear about.
Well, you mentioned it's somewhat politicized and fantasized. So, and it seems that the warrior aspect is it problematic? Is it just interesting? Where does that fit into your researches?
Well, it can be both. I mean, Vikings, we generally tend to think of Vikings as warriors, but what that means is a bit up in the air, which is one of the reasons why we're doing this research in Oslo. The project is actually called Making a Warrior, which tries to determine how that sense of warriorhood would have actually expressed itself in the Viking Age itself, because we assume that this would have been, a society that was very sort of martial and had very violent aspects to it, but we don't quite get the nuances of it, and we don't quite know how those societies would have organized themselves. Certainly not just violently, because if you just, go on raids all day, every day, that's not a really sustainable way to live, I imagine.
And why would the Vikings, as opposed to any other group, be so present and so persistent in our cultural ideas of long ago groups? As I mentioned in the intro, they haven't been around for a rather long time, and yet they stay current. And I wonder if also, is there an aspect of these are white warriors? So does that play into it from and again, as something to think about, and who's admiring them?
Well, I think there are many aspects about the Viking Age that people kind of see themselves in to some degree, whether it's the really sort of the warrior aspect, whether people consider themselves to be quite sort of adventurous individuals. But the Viking Age represents this remarkable period. So it's from roughly the 8th to the 11th century, and we see countless groups of people making their way overseas for all sorts of different reasons. So for trade, for settlement, for violence. And they left a huge mark on the places that they visited. So whether it's in the archaeology they left behind, I mean, some of it can still be seen now in Canada, even in the stories that are written about them and their influence on culture and language. So it's a very complex and fascinating heritage that's still very much with us today. And I think people find their own elements of it that appeals to them. And I think that's why the Vikings they're so versatile in many ways, that many people find something of themselves, or maybe some kind of aspirational element of themselves in the Vikings, whether that's very benign or deeply problematic in some cases.
Well, on the benign side of things, they certainly did. They were very widespread. Everything from, I think of this medical muscle condition called Dupuytren's syndrome, which is apparently traced right back to the Vikings. And then in Canada, it's well established that they showed up in North America long before Columbus. and that's very appealing to many people because so many people are affected by that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think these are some of the questions that we ask in this survey as well. It's not just that we ask what people think the Vikings were or what they did, but also some of the more deep-seated ways that people feel connected to that history, and whether that's through sort of a type of reenactment or craft, or maybe getting a DNA test done, or having a Norse-style like tattoo, or even practicing certain types of customs or rituals. It's a history that's remembered and transformed in so many different ways and for so many different reasons. And that's why we're very keen to find out more about how this is expressed and remembered around the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, before I let you go, remind us again of how people can participate in the study.
Yeah, so you can find us at vikingsurvey.org. That's all one word, no hyphens or anything. It's very straightforward. And the survey is open until mid-May, so you've got some time left. And it's completely secure and anonymous. We don't ask you for your name or anything like that. But yeah, so no matter how you feel about Vikings, and that could be very strongly or not at all, we really appreciate it if you take some time to tell us about it. And it takes only 15 minutes. You can do it over your lunch break, and tell your friends and family.
Thank you very much for being with us on Radio Noon.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Great Viking Survey author Christian Koymans is a postdoctoral researcher at the Museum of Cultural History at the University of Oslo. And as Christian mentioned, if you'd like to participate, go to vikingsurvey.org. With a preview of her third studio album, this is Jade Turner with That Wind.
I've been waiting for my time to come. I've been listening for that wind to hum. It's calling me. Oh, it's calling me. I've been getting ready for the day, for when those trees would start to sway. The dawn is here. Better
Mississipasquitick Cree Nation. That was Jade Turner with That Wind. And coming up on our call-in today, we've just got to keep talking about the proposed 25% tariffs to be imposed by the Trump administration. We just can't look away. The morning show covered it extensively. And earlier in the show, we heard from the manufacturing industry how important imports and exports are. And of course, with things like canola and pork and wheat, everything is quite dependent on back and forth across the border. And we want to hear from you. How are you going to respond to this? How will you help fight back? No more orange juice? Not going to the States this year? Let us know your take on the tariffs. Give us a call, 204-780-0893. The news is next.
This is CBC News. Good afternoon. I'm Rosanna Hempel. At 12:30, it's minus 20 in Winnipeg. A mix of sun and cloud today, high of minus 18. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will have a second phone call with his American counterpart later today as a possible trade war looms. U.S. President Donald Trump has confirmed that 25% tariffs against Canadian goods will go into effect tomorrow. Trudeau has said Canada will retaliate with tariffs of its own. Trudeau has also told opposition leaders that it's increasingly clear this is not about border security, but is a matter of Canadian sovereignty. Meanwhile, Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew is meeting right now with the province's U.S. Trade Council. About 24 people are at the meeting at the legislature. They include business and labor leaders. Kinew has also invited Indigenous leaders.
We do need to respond to the tariffs and the threat that they represent to our economy and to our jobs. And so I think the first thing that I'll be asking folks around the table is for your advice and your insight into how we can support Manitobans, how we can protect our jobs, how we can protect our economy.
Kinew says he also wants to consult with the council members about issues beyond trade. Manitoba farmers are bracing for what comes next. Tobin Dick is a grain farmer north of Winkler. He says it's been a challenging few years and his margins are already tight.
The ripple effects will be devastating for sure. Global competitiveness of many of our crops. I think in a trade war like this, everybody loses except the people watching.
Dick says it's time for Canadian producers to diversify and seek out more global markets for their products. The removal of U.S. alcohol from Manitoba shelves could be an opportunity for local distillers. That from one of the owners of Patent 5, Brock Coots. Patent 5 makes gin, vodka, and whiskey in the Exchange District. Tomorrow, all U.S. product is expected to be removed from Manitoba liquor marts. Coots says later today they're having a production meeting to look at how they could fill those empty shelves.
If in a week or two it does look like this does create an opportunity for us and for local distilleries, then we will pivot, just as we did during the pandemic, to doing something slightly different to take advantage of the opportunity.
Coots says they could easily increase production by 50% if need be. He'd been working on a deal to sell his product into the U.S., but says the tariffs wouldn't make it economical. And that is the CBC News from Winnipeg. Your next local CBC News is at 1:30.
Thank you, Rosanna.
You're welcome.
That's Rosanna Hempel at the CBC News Desk. And with me in the studio is weather specialist Riley Lachuk. Hi, Riley.
Another cold one out there.
Another cold one.
Starting February below seasonal, Lori, we are looking at temperatures like this sticking around for at least the next week or so. So expect winter to continue in earnest for the next week at least here. Right now, minus 20 in Winnipeg. Brandon's at minus 24, minus 23 in Dauphin and Thompson at the moment. Churchill's at minus 26. The far northern part of the province, Brochet to Dooley Lake, under an extreme cold warning. Wind chill factor. We could see frostbite on exposed skin in minutes. Looking at that wind chill close to minus 50 again tonight for far northern parts of the province. We also have that in place for the Parkland region, Riding Mountain, Dauphin, Roblin Russell, into Hamiota, Birtle, that part of the province, not quite as far south as Brandon, but could see wind chills as cold as minus 45 once again overnight tonight. So we're looking at another cold one ahead for Manitoba. A mix of sun and clouds across the province right now. We have seen, we're back into some sunshine here in Winnipeg, but certainly some clouds in other parts of the province today. Expect mostly sunny skies. High pressure clears us out for the next couple of days at least, which will mean mostly sunny, a little bit of cloud cover. As we get later into Tuesday, though, we'll start to see some cloud cover building in. This ahead of our next weather maker, which is a Colorado low that will skirt along the international border. What this will do, though, is spread a little bit of snow a little bit further north. Could even see the sort of the leading edge of this into the Parkland region as we get into the day on Wednesday. So we're dodging most of this, but certainly do expect that we'll see a little bit of snow here in southern Manitoba as we get Wednesday afternoon into Thursday. Winds, I'll very quickly mention, stay relatively strong through today, gusting up to 40, diminishing as we get through the night tonight. So lighter winds tomorrow, but those winds do pick up along the Hudson Bay coast, 40 gusting to 70, for example, in Churchill. Minus 17 today in Winnipeg, minus 21 this afternoon in Brandon. Looking at another minus 17 tomorrow and minus 15s for Wednesday and Thursday.
Those Colorado lows, they can be kind of hard to track. Is that right? Or
yeah,
is it pretty plain? Yeah.
I mean, they follow, for the most part, one of three tracks across our region and through the U.S. Midwest, but certainly this one's tracking a little bit further south this time, so we'll dodge the brunt of it.
So as it comes across the border, will there be a tariff as it comes into
That's
the
a good
country?
question.
Yes. Thank you very much,
You're welcome.
Riley. That's weather specialist Riley Lachuk, and you can hear him this afternoon on Up to Speed between 3 and 6, and of course see him on television on CBC News at 6. You're listening to Radio Noon. It's 24 minutes before 1 o'clock. I'm Lori Hoogstraten. Well, as we've been talking and as we will continue to talk about tariffs, counter tariffs, and now a pause for 1 month on tariffs in Mexico, it's being said. And with Prime Minister Trudeau speaking with President Donald Trump again this afternoon, he spoke with him this morning. The news could change. We just don't know which way it's going to go. But in the meantime, as you think about the tariffs scheduled to start at 12:01 tomorrow morning, Canadian premiers are taking a Team Canada approach to tariffs. And here's what Premier Wab Kinew had to say over the weekend.
We have to stand up for jobs in our province. We have to stand up for manufacturers and the ag industry and the energy industry and everyone else who's going to be threatened by these tariffs. And it's very, very important that we stand up for ourselves, not just as Manitobans, but also as Canadians. The idea of one Manitoba takes on renewed importance. As we head into this period of tariffs, some of our fellow Manitobans are going to feel the impacts right away. For other Manitobans and in other industries, it may take some time, but we all need to stand together, shoulder to shoulder, to be there for one another. The situation that we are confronted with, yes, this is a trade dispute. This is an economic threat. But we should also be very, very clear-eyed about the threat that this poses to our sovereignty as an independent country.
That's Premier Wab Kinew speaking over the weekend. How do you plan to take a Team Canada or a Team Manitoba approach to fighting the tariffs? And what are you not going to be buying anymore? Are you canceling a trip south, or are you going to go anyway? Is this going to affect your job? Give us a call, 204-780-0893, or you can text us at 204-588-7355 and give us your take on the tariffs. Chuck Davidson is the president and CEO of Manitoba Chambers of Commerce, and we welcome him to Radio Noon. Hello.
Hi, Lori.
So tell me, first, what was your response to the 25% tariff announced by President Trump and the counter tariffs suggested by Prime Minister Trudeau?
Well, obviously, it's disappointing that we're going down this path. We know for decades that Canada and the United States, our economies have been intertwined in terms of that importance of each other. We're both each other's largest trading partners. From a Manitoba perspective, we export close to $18 billion worth of goods into the U.S. on an annual basis. That's somewhere in the neighborhood of between 70 and 75% of all exports are going to the States. And likewise, from an American perspective, we're importing close to $23 billion worth of goods from the United States. So we're one of their largest trading partners. So the fact that you would have this longstanding trading relationship, that you would have a free trade agreement in place that was basically developed by President Trump in his last mandate, the fact that he's going into this mandate suggesting we've got a huge issue and we're going to put this tariff in place on Canada, and not really having a good understanding as to what exactly is the issue. Is it a border issue? Is it a fentanyl issue? Is it a trade imbalance issue? I mean, it changes on a day-to-day basis. So that's the challenging situation that businesses in Manitoba and Canada have been put in, is that this is really a trade war that nobody's been looking for, and we're not able to really find an easy solution in terms of exactly what President Trump is looking for that's going to appease him, so that we can be in the same boat as Mexico is, to at least get another month to have some additional conversations.
Yeah, everybody's got to be pretty fast on their feet. And as you say, you don't know what direction this is all going in. And we have callers on the line, and I think we'll go straight to them. And please, listeners out there, join us in this conversation at 204-780-0893. And let's talk to Joletta. Hello.
Hello.
What's your comment?
Well, there's no doubt that we are faced with quite a challenging and likely very precarious situation. There's concern all around the leaders of both countries, the citizens of Canada and the United States. There are many things that could happen. We're imagining a lot of them, because we don't know what the exact impacts will be, but we do know that they are potentially quite serious.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think at this point, what I'm working on is, yes, I am looking at ways that I can concentrate my resources within Canada rather than, for example, trips to the United States and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But also to within ourselves to calm ourselves. I think we think more clearly when we're calm, and we can do so, for example, by having thoughts of gratitude. We can be grateful for what we have had, and what we hope to have in the future. We can look forward with, and also faith is involved here as well. Faith that we can rise to the challenges, and that we can face them head on, and really look for the best possible solutions that I think I'm sure they're there.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Joletta. That's a very kind of calming message that you have, but also very practical as well. I'll ask Chuck to comment.
It's very Canadian, isn't it? It's very Manitoban in terms of the approach that we want to take. We want to find solutions to a problem, right? And I think Joletta talks about it, and it's things that we support. Obviously, we would encourage more and more Manitobans that, when they're going grocery shopping or they're purchasing goods, if you can support local, that's going to be terrific. I think more and more people, and I think one of the things that Trump has done with this is he's really galvanized Canadians into looking at ourselves and saying, okay, we don't want to have that reliance. And here's the challenge we've had with a reliance on the United States for as long as we had. How can we start looking after ourselves a little bit more? So, that's why we're having conversations about internal trade barriers. We're talking about support local campaigns. We're talking about looking at other markets that might be out there for Canada to sort of look at as good trading partners because of that uncertainty that's been created with the U.S. president. We're looking for a more certain time, and I think we're looking for solutions to a problem that we don't think really exists.
Yeah. And we're asking listeners to call in, weigh in, tell us what you think, 204-780-0893, or you can text at 204-588-7355. Let's return to the phone lines. We have Janice on the line. Hi, Janice.
Good afternoon.
What's your point of view?
Okay, I think that what is happening, the premiers getting together, the leadership from the federal government, all of that is good. I would only say that if I had the ear of the prime minister, I'd say let's not apply tariffs on our goods going south. I think we want to flood America with our products and our technology and that, and if we just kind of tit for tat impose tariffs in response to the Americans, we're in effect playing into the irrationality and the bully attitude of the president down there. It's irrational, it's dysfunctional, it's going to affect American consumers as well as Canadians. So let's up the ante. Let's kind of be smarter than Trump and not impose tariffs, but actually, increase our trade going south, we can, on the other hand, we can boycott American goods, which doesn't, I don't think, invalidate the trade agreements that we've now got. And it does encourage and help us with our own Canadian products. And I think, the more we, the public, can buy Canadian, buy local, it's really important. The last quick comment, I really like what the Premier Canoe said this morning about the issue really is sovereignty. That is really important. So the more we can kind of play at that level, the cultural level, the political level, and really play up Canadian values. I think that's what some of the previous comments are also emphasizing. If we can play that up, that's where our strength is. It's not in, playing the American game. So those are my quick comments.
Oh, very well put. Thank you so much. I'll check what his thoughts are. Thank you.
So the only thing on this, and there's sometimes a little bit misconfusion in terms of how the tariffs work. And so what President Trump has really done is any goods that we're sending into the United States are focused on a tariff. The tariff is then paid by the American who is receiving that good. And so what the intent of this is to do is so that the American company that is getting that good from a Canadian company is having to pay 25% more. And so what they're hoping what will happen is that they'll look at other vehicles, they'll look to try to resource it within the United States to not have a reliance on Canada any longer. And so that's where there's sometimes a misconception of how it works. We don't have the ability to flood more product into the United States because simply the tariff will sort of is the barrier that's what's problematic. The challenge, though, is that what it ends up happening is that it's not as simple for an American company to say, okay, we can no longer take goods from Canada, whether it be oil, whether it be critical minerals, whether it be all sorts of product. And so the challenge is, do they want to take on that additional cost, or are they going to expect that Canadian company to lessen it as well? And this is the problem with the tariffs, Lori, is that it ends up being it's the end consumer and the average Canadian, the average American that's going to pay the tariff at the end of the day, that's going to see increased costs. And so what Canada has done is said, okay, any goods that the Americans are sending into Canada, we're now going to put a tariff on that as well, which would then be paid by Canadian companies that are receiving those goods.
Right. Well, that clarifies things, and it is quite a tangled ball of interconnected businesses and so on. We have Luina on the line. Hi, Luina.
Hello?
Hello. What's your comment?
Well, I think that the instability that this is causing in terms of people possibly losing their jobs, etc., and I live in northwest Winnipeg, I think this is the perfect time for people to start growing their own vegetable gardens. They're not reliant on American vegetables there to such a degree. You can rent a rototiller from Pollock Hardware. The vegetables don't take a lot of care. They taste differently. And we've planted a garden for years, and we eat all summer off it and also give to friends. In fact, we're still eating tomatoes frozen and squash. And in terms of starting it, you can get your 4-litre milk jugs, cut them just below the handle, and use egg cartons to raise your seeds. It's a really clean way of doing it, and there's no mess.
Yeah.
And the difference in taste between homegrown vegetables and store-bought is amazing.
And you've got some self-sufficiency going on there, and that's kind of the whole Team Canada, Team Manitoba idea. Thank you very much for your call, Luina. And do give us a call, 204-780-0893. And we had a call before the show. Here's Kathleen.
My name is Kathleen. I'm hoping the focus, the message given on radio, TV, whatever, is to not buy American rather than buy Canadian. We have lots of other countries that send produce, etc., from Mexico, Australia, etc., and I think at this time we should be buying from lots of other countries.
Thanks very much, Kathleen, for that call. And Chuck, I think I'm just going to stay with the listener lines or the phone lines at the moment. We have people calling in at 204-780-0893. Let us know what you think about the Trump tariffs and what you think should be done about them and what action you're taking yourself. Are you not buying something? It sounds like you won't be buying any California wine or Kentucky whiskey. That seems to be coming off the shelves. But maybe you aren't buying any orange juice either. Or maybe, as we were talking earlier in the show, about the manufacturing industry, to buy made in Manitoba. Let's talk to Jane. We have her on the line. Hi, Jane. Oh, sorry, Sharon. I beg your pardon. Sharon.
Hi.
Hi.
I was just going to offer a comment about, unfortunately, Canadians' extremely short memories. I have a longer one because I remember 39 years ago, Prime Minister Brian Mulroney and President Ronald Reagan signing the first U.S.-Canada free trade deal. And I remember the debates in Parliament, the back and forth, the talking about how it's going to be good for our country, it's going to solve the softwood lumber tariffs, which to this day still exist. And here we are 40 years later almost. And I remember a former Prime Minister, John Turner, as then opposition leader, standing up in Parliament and saying, once the economic levers go, the political are sure to follow. And here we are. Because I think people are misunderstanding Donald Trump's way of thinking. And I mean, goodness knows he's confusing and hard to follow.
Yes.
But I think he's using fentanyl, border security as a smokescreen for what he really wants. And he says he doesn't need anything from Canada. I call you-know-what on that. He wants our critical minerals. He wants our softwood lumber. He wants our oil and gas. He wants our hydro, because that's going to create the golden age for America at our expense. That's what this is really all about. He keeps going on about the 51st state. And I've read comments in forums and whatnot about Canadians saying, oh, yeah, let's be the 51st state. Wake up, people. You know what you'd be? Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
So I think it's important for Canadians to remember that we've been here before, that we've had 40 years to expand our economy and buy Canadian and look for other trade markets. And did we do it? No. So my only silver lining in this whole thing is that Trump has finally made us wake up and realize we're a sovereign nation and we should act like one.
Thank you very much for your comments, Sharon. That's nice that you have that long memory. You can put the things in perspective. Thank you very much. We have lots of people on the line. Chuck, did you want to make a quick comment on that? I know you were talking along those lines.
I think Sharon raises a valid point, and I think it's the bigger picture. We've become so reliant on the U.S. and as I kind of talked about earlier, in terms of when you talk about the trade numbers and the percentage that we do on an annual basis and what those economies have been like and how intertwined they are, and it works both ways as well. And at the same time, and I do agree that I think to Sharon's point, this has been a bit of a wake-up call for Canada in terms of what are some of the things that we need to focus on. We have not put in place some of that critical infrastructure to get things like our oil and gas and our products to other markets. So we've been reliant on the United States. My hope is that this will create investments at ports of Vancouver, Port of Churchill, other opportunities to move our goods outside of just the United States. So this is something that I think is something that's really in front of government in both provincial and in the federal level, that it's time to act on best behalf of Canada, Manitoba.
Those were the points that Sharon was raising, and we have several other callers on the line. So let's speak with Jane. Hi, Jane.
Oh, good afternoon. I really echo what Sharon brought up because no one else has been bringing that up at all. But I'll tell you, there's many of us here who have been supporting Canada for decades. We have chosen not to buy offshore things, and that comes out to food too. You go to the grocery store and you're thinking, well, maybe one item out of 25 is from Canada. So we have to choose, and we should have been choosing all along, to support ourselves. So for many of us, won't be much of a challenge because it's like our lifestyle.
Great. You're leading the way.
Well, and many people who should have been leading the way are now waking up that they should have been there to educate the masses to support yourself. whether it's the farmer down the road or the egg producer in Portage or wherever. Support Manitoba, but support your own people. If anyone can tell me the last time they bought an apple grown in Canada, I want to hear from them.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Jane. Thank you very much for your call. We're just going to stay with the listener line. We only have, the call lines. We only have a few minutes left, so let's squeeze in as many calls as we can. We have Jim on the line. Hi, Jim.
Hello, how are you?
Very well, thanks. What's your comment?
Well, I think that it's very simple. We need to stop thinking about what Donald Trump or anybody else is doing and start focusing on what we can do in our country to produce and make available products that we can afford. Stop buying, especially from China, and making other countries rich. We need to start making our people in our country rich by producing stuff that we can use here and afford to buy. It's ridiculous that we spend money on dealing with what other countries want and not focusing on what we want. We're too busy fighting about what's bad is happening instead of what good can we do. How can we make it better?
Great.
Way too much time. The news media constantly, Donald Trump, Donald Trump. I don't give a shit what Donald Trump does. I don't live in the U.S.
Yeah.
I live here, and we need to start focusing on this country and our people and how to make things affordable here. And most of all, we need to get our government back into Parliament and get an election and get our stuff straightened out here. Forget about the rest of the world.
Well, thank you very much, Jim. I'm going to ask Chuck to comment on that briefly. We have other callers on the line, but thank you for your call. Chuck, what do you think about that?
It's about controlling what we can control, right? We can't control what's going to come out of the mouth of the President of the United States on a daily basis, but what can we control? We can control our own economy. We can control the barriers that are in front of businesses right now. We can make ourselves more profitable. We can make ourselves more productive in Canada. Those are things that we can do on our own. These are things that we need to be focusing on during these challenging times.
Right. And we're going to stay with the call lines. We have Lenore. Lenore, we just have a couple minutes left, but we'd like to hear from you.
Well, number one, I'm a gardener, but also that I like to buy local. Anything I can buy local, I do. But I grow a lot of things that I have bare fruit as well as vegetables that I grow. The one things I have bought from the States is some seeds that I can't get here are from Johnny Select Seeds in Maine, and they are they're a very good company, and they're owned by the people who work there and use seeds. And I have bought some sweet pea seeds from another place called Renee's Seeds in the States. But other than that, I buy everything from Canadian companies and first of all, local companies like Heritage Harvest Seeds in Fisher Branch, Manitoba, and I preserve and freeze from my own garden. So there's squash in my basement, and there's carrots in my basement, and canned tomatoes and things in my freezer.
Good.
That's why I think everybody should think about supporting themselves. You know, years ago, through the war and the Depression, people had little gardens and they fed themselves. They didn't have to go to food banks.
You're right, and we're going to have to jump in there. I'm so sorry, we're running right out of time, but you're a great example, and that's actually been supported by a couple of other callers. Thank you very much for your call. And Chuck, I'll just have enough time to say thank you very much, and I'll give you a last word.
Yeah, I think this is important, and I think your callers today, Lori, have outlined some of the things that they can do, which is supporting local. Other things that they can do. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we want to end this trade war as quickly as we can. So if it means writing a letter or sending a note to U.S. Congress people to put pressure on some of those key states where we have relationships and strong trading relationships and partnerships, do that as well, because I think at the end of the day, that's what it's going to take. It's going to take pressure from organizations like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce that have already talked about this trade war is not good for the United States, nor is it good for the average American citizen. So that's the kind of pressure that's going to unfortunately need to happen for this to come to an end.
Well, thank you very much for your insights and expertise, Chuck. It's been great having you with us.
Anytime, Lori.
That's Chuck Davison. He's president and CEO of the Manitoba Chambers of Commerce. And coming up on Up to Speed this afternoon, more on this, U.S. tariffs and the Canadian auto sector. They'll be talking to Greg Layson from the Automotive News Canada about how integrated the industry is between Canada and the U.S. and how the tariffs could be potentially crippling. You've been listening to Radio Noon. Thank you very much for all your calls. Good to talk to you. Stay warm. Talk to you again soon.